Hello, I'm Dr. David Lee and welcome to the ICE Center Internal Cellular Exercise. I'm going to start you off by just explaining a little bit what we would do with a new client in the office and explain a little bit about the philosophies of how we work. It's our philosophy that the body is made in an image that would manifest, for me as a Christian believer, God, the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, or the structural, the chemical, the autosuggestion, or for some people in today's world they may say mind, body, spirit. In other words, three parts. There's three parts to our bodies. We have structure, which is what you're made of, your DNA. You have chemistry, which is what you eat, drink, and breathe. And you have your autosuggestion, or your emotions, which is what you think about, or what you're thinking about from your life experiences from birth until now. In the scripture it says it's impossible to separate the three parts of the God that I serve as a Christian believer. So it says it 8 times. 8 times it says that it's impossible to separate the three parts of God. So I took that to sincerity when I thought it must be impossible to separate the three parts of my body. So in other words, it's very difficult for me to see how I could even think about separating my physical injuries from my emotional traumas, from my chemistry or my chemical imbalances. So when we treat a patient, we treat all three sides at the same time. Because if I fall down and hurt my knee and I get a Band-Aid put on my knee or I get a surgery put on my knee, I've fixed the physical injury. I haven't fixed the emotional component, nor have I fixed the chemistry. And I found in my 30 years of practice that if I don't fix all three, we don't fix the problem. We put a Band-Aid on it and then the problem continues to come back and return and come back and return. And then the patient ends up coming back to see us over and over and over again. That's not what the patient wants. That's not what the doctor wants. So if we're made in that image and we have these little pieces, God's armor also had symbols. So does my body have symbols. Each part of the body has symbols. Examples might be that your shoulder joint is a symbol of carrying burdens for other people that don't belong to you. Or your knee joint might be the next step I take in life. Or the wrist, for those people that suffer with wrist problems, might be, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place, darn if I do and darn if I don't. The body is very specific and very specific to right and left as well. Now this research comes from Dr. Hamer, H-A-M-E-R, a German oncologist who studied 35 to 40,000 cases, and he actually did white paper documentations on 44,000 actual cancer patients, where he was allowed to get a treatment record and came up with 92% of his patients getting well from cancer without using chemo, radiation, or surgery, all using the body clock and using MRIs to study the brain and the body and other techniques along the way that we'll discuss. The fun part about it is that if you can map out the body, you can also map out the emotions and as well as map out the chemistry and what to do for the patient. So no longer are we going to get a chiropractic adjustment to cure something, or no longer are you going to take a pill to cure something. You're going to work on the whole body approach. Now, if all disease in the human body starts with some kind of a shock, a trauma, or a surprise. Let's say that again. If all disease in the human body starts with some kind of a shock, a trauma, or a surprise, and I'm here to say that that's true, then the body goes into a 2-step protocol. Now 2 steps, not the dance in Texas, but a 2-step protocol, which is starting with a title of A, the first step being the conflict phase of disease. The second phase being the healing phase of disease. Now during the conflict phase of disease, and some people might call it the incubation period, the conflict phase of disease you have no signs or symptoms whatsoever. That means you cannot get a diagnosis during the conflict phase. If you have no signs or symptoms, there's no way to diagnose. The healing phase is when you get all of the symptoms. In other words, pain, vomiting, diarrhea, fever, running, wanting to sleep all the time, growing a tumor is all signs of the healing phase. Now, before you think that I'm crazy, let's go backwards again. During the conflict phase, an example might be chickenpox. Your child, or you as a child, were exposed by your cousin to chickenpox. Your aunt calls your mom the next day and says, guess what, your cousin has chickenpox and your child probably will too. The next week you're actually scheduled for your annual physical exam by your pediatrician, and they check you out and they say, well, they may have been exposed to chickenpox, but there's no signs and symptoms, so we don't think your child has chickenpox. But sure enough, about 15 days later, you wake up with red blotches and a fever. Now your grandmother can even diagnose you with chickenpox. But a week ago when you were at the pediatrician's office, there were no signs or symptoms whatsoever and no diagnosis. Food poisoning is another one. Now it takes about 6 to 8 hours for food poisoning to materialize in your body. So if you ate lunch at noon with some friends and you went back for seconds because the food tasted so good, and then about 2:30 in the afternoon you realized that it was your turn for your annual physical and you wanted to hurry up and get out of there, so you told your friends that you're eating with, hey, I've got to leave early. You guys enjoy going back for thirds if you like, since it's a really great place to eat, but I've got to go get my annual physical. Now at almost 60 years old, what happens is you have to spend a couple of hours getting checked from head to toe, up, down, inside out. You get the idea without being graphic. But after 2 hours of standing around in a gown and a clipboard in your hand, the doctor comes in, you get your clothes back, they shake your hand and say, you know, David, you're healthy as a horse. We'll see you next year. So you've had a pretty good day. You had a great morning at work, a nice lunch with friends and family, or the buddies you were hanging out with, and it was all you could eat, those kind of place. Then you got a great report from your doctor. Your doctor said, healthy as a horse. We'll see you next year. So you're home, sitting in your PJs, watching Dances with the Stars or whatever you do in the evening. You're sitting there next to your spouse, and you feel a little rumble in your tummy, and you think, oh, I got to excuse myself to go to the bathroom. Well, don't worry, you've got this new technology where you can put the TV on hold and you won't miss anything. 15 seconds into the bathroom experience, you are reaching frantically for the trash can because all of a sudden, not only do you have diarrhea, but you're also vomiting, and you have diagnosed yourself pretty fast to say, honey, I have food poisoning. You better tape the rest of that show for me. Now, what happened? When did you get sick? Well, some of you might say, well, you said it was about 8 o'clock at night. I was sitting in my PJs. I got sick at 8 o'clock. And other people might say, well, no, you got sick at noon because that's when you ate the food. But your doctor said, healthy as a horse, see you next year at about 4:30. So now you're understanding the conflict phase was in the early phase. During the afternoon, after you'd eaten the food, while the food was processing, the healing phase happened when your body began to have the symptoms. Now, the key to the symptoms beginning is when and if your body decides that everything is hunky-dory darn, we say in Georgia. In other words, when your body realizes that the shock, trauma, surprise is gone and it's okay, it's not coming back, and I'm not in danger anymore, then and only then does your body begin the process of beginning to attempt to heal the injury or the incident. That is when the symptoms appear. Now, this is the only part that I know for sure. After 30 years, I get to say I don't know a lot, but this part I know for sure. The longer you're in the conflict phase of any disease process, the bigger and grouchier the healing phase is going to be. So when you think about that in contrast, the chickenpox took about 14 days, maybe 15 to 21 if you want to be textbook, but it was gone within a week. The food poisoning took 6 to 8 hours, but it was gone within 12 more hours. Now, most cancers we know, research are showing that it might take 5, 10, 15 years to develop, and it might be there the rest of your life, or it may be life-threatening. I think you're getting the picture here. The longer you're in the conflict, the bigger and the badder the healing phase is going to be. Now, this could happen for 4 or 5 generations ago if you get biblically on me, because what about children with cancer that are 3 years old? Well, the sins of the father could be served up to 4 generations ago, is a quote that I wanted to give you. So here we have people with a shock, trauma, surprise, going to the doctor, getting a good bill of health, and then all of a sudden being over the threshold or having a problem where like, oh my goodness, we're in trouble. Now at first, 30 years ago when I first heard this, I thought this was a little bit crazy and way outside the box. The fellow that was teaching me this, I was going, he's just lost it, he's crazy, it doesn't make any sense. Do you mean to tell me that if I can't make up my mind what job to take next when I'm interviewing for a job that I'm going to fall down and hurt my knee? It made no sense at all. But now that I've studied it over the past 30 years with patient after patient after patient, it's starting to become scary accurate. Very scary accurate. It's really kind of fun. And even all the things that we thought were the cause of disease are still true. 1/3 of all disease is definitely caused by genetic and by structure. 1/3 of all disease is definitely caused by chemistry or imbalances in your diet. 1/3 are definitely some kind of emotional or other stresses. but one doesn't necessarily cause the other two, but surely when one problem happens, the other two follow like a shadow. So one of my patients was playing volleyball on a Thursday night. He fell and hit his left knee on the gym floor. Several of us that were there heard the noise and saw that he was certainly injured. A week later, he comes back to report that he had a meniscus tear and he suffered a surgery, and he went to pick the best surgeon in town, and he was happy that the physical therapist was doing a great job, and we were happy for him. The rest of the interview went like this. What else was happening in your life during that time? He said, well, I had been unemployed for about a year, and I had finally gotten to the point where I had about a week left of my unemployment. I got a phone call and got excited because it was a job interview in Houston, Texas. So I rushed home after I got the interview and told my wife that we had an opportunity in Houston, Texas. But my wife said, I'd rather stay on unemployment than go to Houston, Texas because we live in New York. She said, it's not happening. So here he is trying to decide which way to go. What do I do next? And he falls and hits his knee on the same day. Coincidence? Accident? I'm going to let you decide. But this has happened time after time after time. So I'm thinking there might be a connection here somewhere along the way. And it just seems too scary obvious to me. So when we scan our patients, we start off on the ZytoScan, Z-Y-T-O, putting their hand plate on here using EAV technology that you can look up on zyto.com. It gives us an opportunity not only to see what their nutritional needs might be, but also to see what their emotions might be. It might be able to give us what their dental records are looking like. It'll give us an acupuncture reading on them. It'll give us meridian readings on them. It'll tell us what their spine is doing. It's really fun technology and very, very cutting edge. Now, when we scan a patient and we go to the page that we call affectionately the current events page, it'll tell us that the top 3 inflammation areas or organ systems might be that their pancreas is upset, or their adrenals are upset, or their liver is upset. Those are the areas that the body is spending a lot of energy on. But remember, each part of the body has a what? A symbol. So if the person's number 1 inflammation area is the pancreas, then I know that symbol is unresolved family issues. And then sometimes I get a little chuckle because I go, boy, if you just knew about my family. Or if it's about their bladder, then the bladder for a female is about my job topic, or my territory, or my role in life more properly. And she's saying my territory or my role in life. For the male, it's just about territory usually, like what hat he's going to wear, or how much property he has, or what his family life is like. But it's my territory and my role. Again, scary accurate. Gallbladder holds bitterness and resentment. So the lungs are about grief and sorrow, or a death fright, or scared to death. The kidney, the most dangerous of all in the hospital, because the number 1 cause of death in American hospitals today, listed on the death certificate, is kidney failure. The kidneys are about abandonment. Somebody threw me under the bus. Somebody didn't support me. Somebody didn't protect me. The results are high or low blood pressure, high or low cholesterol, kidney stones, polycystic kidney disease, or kidney failure. Here's an example. You might think there's a lot of people with high blood pressure issues, but if it came from abandonment, you would think that you would have high blood pressure when your parents got divorced, for example. You'd be 4 years old when your mom and dad separated, dad was gone. There's no 4-year-olds running around with hypertension per se, but that's because that's the conflict phase. That's the shock, the trauma, the surprise. When is it okay not to have a dad? It's never okay not to have a dad in the house. But it gets better when you become the parent of a 4-year-old, if that's when your dad left, and you make a decision to do what? You make a decision to stay in the marriage. You make a decision to take your kid to play ball, to take him to church, to be part of the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, etc., etc. Now that is when your body thinks everything is hunky-dory darn, and that is when your body starts to heal the sins of your father. That's when the blood pressure starts, or the cholesterol starts, or the kidney stone starts. The body is an amazing holographic computer, and it will tell you everything you need to know about it if you ask the questions and you monitor how and when it began, and how and when it can start, and how and when it can change. That's what we call NeuroSet or EVOX on the Zyto technology, where we actually have the opportunity to have you talk about your stresses with talk therapy, and then record it, and then play it back, and then change your brain's home page on the technology by using music, by using prayer, by using thought and talk therapy, by allowing you to change the way your body was thinking about the abandonment issue, When we change the way you look at something, the things you look at change. So does your body physiology follow, because as a man thinketh, so is he. Now, there's some other issues in the body and many, many more body parts, etc. And they're all relatively entertaining, but it's not so entertaining when you're the person with a diagnosis. Remember, we talked about that earlier. The word diagnosis is very interesting, to say the least. A light interpretation from Latin to English might be di means two or more. Agnose means not to know. SIS, the process of. So when you are rendered a diagnosis, that really means, literally, that two or more people really don't have a clue what's wrong with you. So I get a little worried about the word diagnosis because I thought it was an old Latin word, but it's actually a relatively new Latin word that's not more than 100 years old, probably formed by a bunch of actuarians to determine what box to put you in by an insurance company so we would know who's going to pay and who's not. We've been brainwashed to think that we got to go get our diagnosis so we'll know how to get well. When in actuality, you're not getting the diagnosis for any other purpose except for to determine what your money's going to do or who's going to pay or who's not going to pay. The diagnosis literally has nothing to do with your treatment. Now, please don't misunderstand me to think that when I talk about treatment phase and healing phase that I'm against treatment. I'm certainly not. I wouldn't live in a town without an emergency room. I don't like to bleed. I don't certainly want to be in pain. But the bottom line is that if you stop the healing process, you do that by stopping the symptoms. And if you simply block or erase the symptoms without considering the whole body approach, you simply stop it temporarily. Then it comes back to get you over and over and over again. Or you stop the healing completely. And that's not what you want to do. You want to work together with all of your practitioners and all of your healthcare providers to give you the best bang for your buck, so to speak. Now, while we're on that topic, let's talk a little bit about the heart, because the heart is overwhelmed. That's the emotion behind the heart. And the number one killer in America is still heart disease or cardiovascular events, but it doesn't happen like on television. People do not get stressed out during a business meeting and then grab their chest and fall over from a heart attack. The heart attack happens just like all disease. Shock, trauma, surprise, and then the healing phase begins later. So the more common time to have a heart attack might be 5 days, 5 weeks, or 5 years after that stressful event that they showed on TV where the person got all stressed out in a business meeting or a family episode. Now you're sitting around watching cartoons with drinking a decaf on Saturday morning. You get up to go to the refrigerator and bang, that's when it happens. 79% of the time, the number one symptom of heart disease, what are heart disease symptoms? You know, pain in the arm, numbness and tingling, chest pain, back pain, shortness of breath, difficulty going up and down the stairs, those kind of things. The number one symptom of heart disease, 79% of the time, is a fatal heart attack. In other words, there were no signs or symptoms until the immediate healing phase happened so big that it expired the person's life. That's why on every patient we want to run a cardiac test called a max pulse. It looks like a little white box with a lot of software on the computer where you put your finger cock in there. It takes 3 minutes to evaluate the digital pulse index, the electrical conductivity, an EKG, the pulse rate variability, how your hormones are doing, how your hydration is doing, what your remaining blood volume is doing. More information than most cardiologists record in 30 minutes in a test in 3 minutes. It's that important that you know what your cardiovascular health is doing. People like the American Heart Association and the digital pulse indexes make these little booklets to tell us about phase 1, phase 2, how much plaquing, how much arteriosclerosis there is. It will give us a scale of 1 to 8, and 1 is where you want to be, by the way, so that your body's in a healthy, happy condition. And if it's not, what to do about it. We'll do that as part of our scans as well. That happens on every patient visit. And once you have a scan, we want to reevaluate it about every 90 days if there's an issue. If there's not an issue, see you next year, remember? Okay. Now, when you come in and get a scan, we want to look at the body. We want to give you examples of this. I'll give you one right now. What if somebody showed on their little Zyto scan that the emotion was adrenal glands? Well, the adrenal glands, of course, have a physiology, but the emotion behind the physiology is thrown off course or made a bad decision. Gallbladder, we mentioned, was bitterness or resentment. The pineal gland is your connection to God or higher power. The pituitary gland, remember, that tells you when you're hot, when you're cold, when you're hungry. That's the regulator for the body. So when you're out of regulation, that means you have chaos. The hypothalamus gland is a good one. It's in the roof of the mouth. Why do you think so many children suck their thumbs as little people? It's not because of the lack of Tabasco sauce on their thumb like somebody's grandmother might think. It's actually because they are not feeling good about themselves, and by pushing 2 fingers up on the roof of the mouth or a thumb on the roof of the mouth, you're actually stimulating the hypothalamus gland to feel better. There was a study done by a major university about chewing gum in 8th grade math class. The children that were allowed to chew gum during a math test actually did better on their math test because they felt better about themselves by the stimulation of the roof of the mouth. But, as I last heard, it's still illegal to chew gum in public school. So I'm trying to figure that one out. Now, there's also the spleen, which is your self-esteem. There's the thyroid, which is powerless. I'm powerless to catch something in life or powerless to get rid of something in life. Elbows are about transitions. Shoulders are about carrying burdens for other people that don't belong to you. The neck is about validation. I'm not getting validated. We talked about the knee, but how about fingers and toes? That's giving and receiving love. And since we're talking about love, how about liver? The liver's #1 job is to take the food we eat and turn it into glycogen so your cells can make adrenal triphosphate for energy. And if your liver's not doing job #1, then it certainly can't do job #2, which is to reconjugate your hormones, and job #3, which is to help to detoxify the body. But job 1 would be starvation if it's not working. So the liver symbol, starvation of love. So it's not anger like we all thought before. It's angry because you're starving of love. The pancreas, we said, was unresolved family issues. You remember that? Small intestines and stomach, those two share their role because they're so close together. Enough, it's all about indigestible anger. Something was fed. You got a morsel of life fed you that was, I can't throw it up, I can't spit it out, I don't know what to do with it. It's just stuck there. Oh my goodness, it's indigestible. So each part of the body gives us a hint. So if your scan came up with the top 3 things being, let's say it's heart, pancreas, and liver, and the bottom on the scan was bladder. So heart, pancreas, liver, and bladder. Heart is overwhelmed, pancreas is family issues, and liver is starvation of love. So the person is overwhelmed because of unresolved family issues that cause them a starvation of love and a change in role or territory in their life. Sounds like a fun story, but when you scan an individual, it comes up scary accurate every time. The rest of the scan is performed to find out what your acupuncturists are doing, what your teeth are doing, what your spine is doing. It's a very comprehensive scan, it says, but more importantly, it's what we do with it. After we find out what your story is, then we can have you talk about it, record it on a video recorder with an audio only, and then play it back so that you can understand what the vibrations are behind the emotion. Each part of the body has hidden emotions, and the emotions will show up on the screen with the software and allow us to actually reprogram your thought products on there. That's called the E-Box. It's very exciting, and the results are tremendous and more than we can talk about today, but scary accurate. Now, besides the heart, there's the water. The body is 72% water. That means that 28% of the things that I affect your body with other treatments matter, but 72% have to do with the water and the water exchange in your body. Let's say that the cells in the body are hanging in the room like a big group of grapes. Here's a big pile of grapes, and I'm hanging by the stem, and I want to wash those grapes off. So I pour some water over the grapes, just like pouring a drink of water into my throat to wash my cells. Now what happens if I pour water over these grapes? Everybody knows the water washes off the grapes and the water goes straight down, and the water takes the quickest path to the floor. My grandfather would always say, that which makes rivers or men crooked is by following the path of least resistance. And that's what the water is going to do. The water is going to pour over the grapes, or it's going to pour into my throat. It's going to take the path of least resistance and get out of there as quick as it can. Interestingly enough, my cells are not getting hydrated when that happens. About 95% of the water that I drink, or maybe 99% if I'm stressed out, is going to be the same water that I urinate later in the day. It's not going to hydrate my cells, it's just going to rinse off my cells. Now there's a phenomenon in the human being cells where the aquaporin, or the size of the pore in the side of the cells that allow water in and water out. And why is that important? Because the water in your cell is 72% of your body. The water in your cell needs to be replenished often. The water in your cell carries the nutrients from other things into the cell and carries the toxins out of the cell. If you're pouring water over the cell and not exchanging water in and out of the cells, then the water inside your cells gets old, stagnant, and stale. You begin to rust and rot from the inside out. So what we want to do is we want to be drinking some water that allows your water to do what? To go in and out of the cell membrane. That's based on the size of the water molecule, not based on how clean or how dirty the water is, not based even on the pH of the water, but based on the size of the water molecule. The aquaporin, or the pores on the side of the skin, the pores on the side of your individual cells inside your body, will hold a 6 hexagonal sided cell of water, H2O times 6 or less. In other words, 6 H2O molecules stuck together will fit into my cells, 7 or more will not. Now here's an interesting little tidbit. Most of the bottled water that we buy for about $10 a gallon if you add it up, and that would be name brand companies like Fiji and Public Spring Water and Aquafina and Desagné by Coca-Cola, and all of these major water companies have a water particle size of about 12 to 24, which means they're double, triple, and quadruple too big to go into my cells. Now I know, because the water will go into the body, and if it stays there long enough, my body will actually theoretically chew it up and get it inside my cells. But most of us are so stressed and so much in a hurry that that's not happening, and the water is rushing right off the grapes or right off of your cells and running right down into the kidney and the bladder and making it a quick exit, so you're peeing the same water you're drinking. And the water that's in your body becomes old and stagnant. The Kangen water is water that is made in a particle size that will actually go in and out of your cells, which will increase your body's ability to absorb. As a matter of fact, you don't want to drink Kangen water with a prescription because it is so effective at getting in and out of your cells that it might cause your prescription to work a little too fast, a little too good. So bear that in mind with your healthcare provider. The Kangen water comes from Japan. It's a technology that's about 40 years old, and yes, there are lots of machines out there that make water and make water small. But the water is small because of electrolysis activity. In other words, the water was struck by lightning. That's how it was discovered. Water that is struck by lightning, the plants, the fish, the plant life inside the water there grows faster, gets healthier, thrives. Water that doesn't becomes stagnant. This water through a Kangen machine has big enough plates that the water will hold that particle size for about 3.5 days, which is plenty of time for it to process through your body. All of the other machines that I have tested, the ones that will actually make the water particle size small, which are few and far between, but the ones that will actually do it will last for about 30 seconds, which is not quite long enough to get it even into the glass and into my body, let alone process it through my cells. So that's why I picked that water particle. We give the water away at our clinic because it works so well. We call it the 30-day challenge. We have you to drink nothing but the Kangen water for 30 days. We don't have you to make your coffee or tea, excuse me, the old-fashioned way. If you can't get off your coffee or tea, you make it with the Kangen water. No microwaving, please. It's okay to heat it. The particle size of the Kangen water is so small that you could actually make iced tea without boiling the water. You don't even have to heat it. You can see that on a demonstration on my website, and you can see that on the Kangen water website as well. Or you can do it at home for yourself. 30 days and watch what happens to your body and your hydration levels. Things will change drastically. Very exciting to say the least. Now there's some other technology that we use upstairs in the ice room for therapy purposes. One of them is called pulse electromagnetic frequency, PEMF, pulse electromagnetic frequency. If every cell in your body is like I described, opening and closing like a jellyfish, there are ways to stimulate that. One of the best ways to stimulate that is with a pulse electromagnetic frequency, sometimes nicknamed the tensegrity machine. We also use biomat, which is a mat with infrared sauna effect You don't have to get into the sauna. You don't have to get all sweaty and naked. You just have to get on the mat. With the amethyst stones, it will create a sauna effect. There's a cymotherapy, C-Y-M-A, sound wave therapy, that's been verified with before and after thermographies for countless conditions. It's a plate that you put your feet on like a jelly pad. It looks like a bathroom scale glorified, but it sends sound waves up through your acupuncture points of your feet for changing the body frequencies. We also use ionic foot baths. Not putting your feet in a bucket of water to get dirty water, putting your feet in the water to get the red blood cells to separate and become more polarity active. The positive ion going on the inside and the negative ion going on the outside, which creates an ability for the red blood cells to carry oxygen to the cells, nutrients to the body, electricity to the body, and more importantly, toxins out of the body. If your red blood cells are working properly after a foot bath, 60% of your toxins will leave your body through your breath, 30% through the skin, 7% the colon, 3% the bladder. So if you do the math, the bathroom is not the bad place. The foot bath works by making the red blood cells more available and more separated instead of what the average person is, which is rouleau or stack, blood stacking, where 2, 3, 4, 5,000 red blood cells are so stuck together that they are virtually useless to carry oxygen or nutrients or toxins out of the body. There are other things that we use in the clinic as well. There's a photon sound beam that helps to get the lymphatics flowing. Very exciting technologies. We invite you to come upstairs and see it. We invite you to get a scan. We invite you to get an opportunity to get the reading and see what your cardiovascular health is all about. In a consult with me myself, I come to town at least once a month for 2 or 3 days to see just those special people that want to be able to get their health back on track. So God bless you. Thanks for your attention. We'll see you upstairs.